April 24th, 1980, 11:57 p.m. A salt flat in the middle of the Iranian desert. No moon, no lights, no sound except wind and the distant whine of engines. 132 of America's best soldiers stand in the darkness, loaded, ready, waiting. They have been training for this moment for 5 months. They know the embassy layout from memory. They know the guard rotations. They know which rooms hold the hostages. They have rehearsed every second of what comes next. Delta Force, the most elite unit in the United States military. They have never failed a mission. Tonight, they will not fire a single shot. Tonight, 8 of them will die in a fireball on a salt flat in the desert. The most powerful military in human history will abandon its own helicopters, its own weapons, its own classified documents, and run. And nobody back home even knows this is happening. In Washington, a president sits by a phone in the Oval Office, waiting for news that will never come. In Tehran, 53 Americans sleep in their cells with no idea that their rescue is burning a few hundred miles away. This is Operation Eagle Claw, the mission that failed before it started, and the story of how the worst military disaster in American history accidentally built the most lethal special forces on Earth. To understand why 53 Americans ended up in a cell in Tehran, you have to go back 26 years before that desert night, because the Iran hostage crisis did not begin on November 4th, 1979. It began in 1953 with a CIA operation that most Americans have never heard of and that Iranians never forgot. Iran, a democratically elected prime minister named Mohammad Mossadegh, had just nationalized Iran's oil industry. British and American oil companies were furious. The CIA and British intelligence organized a coup. Mossadegh was overthrown, arrested, tried for treason, imprisoned, and the Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was reinstalled on the throne as a fully pro-Western ruler. The CIA trained his secret police. The secret police were called Savak. Savak was described by historians as internationally infamous for the brutality and macabre creativity of its torturers. Thousands of political dissidents were arrested, hundreds executed. For 26 years, the Shah ruled with American support and American weapons, while his own people suffered. By the late 1970s, the pressure had built to a breaking point. In January, the Shah fled the country. In February, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini returned from exile in Paris to a crowd of millions. The Islamic Revolution had won. The anger at America that had been building for 26 years now had a government to express it. In October 1979, Jimmy Carter made a decision that seemed like simple humanitarian decency. The Shah, now in exile and dying of cancer, requested entry to the United States for medical treatment. Carter agreed. In Iran, the reaction was immediate and volcanic. The last time America had given the Shah protection, it had been to reinstall him on the throne. Every Iranian remembered that. November 4th, 1979, 6:30 a.m., Tehran. The U.S. Embassy compound sits behind high walls in the heart of the city. 14 acres of American soil. Inside, diplomats and staff are beginning their day, filing reports, drinking coffee, completely unaware. Outside, a crowd is gathering, not students with sign, an army with ropes and bolt cutters. As many as 3,000 of them rush the gates. The 13 Marine security guards have orders not to fire into the crowd. They fire tear gas. It makes no difference. The gates give way. The students flood the compound. They move building to building. Americans are grabbed from their desks, from hallways, from locked offices where they are hiding. Within hours, 66 Americans are in Iranian hands. Within days, 13 are released. They will not see the outside of Iranian custody for 444 days. What those 444 days were actually like is something most people never heard. Barry Rosen, the embassy press attaché, described it this way: "They tied us up hand and foot. You felt like a piece of meat. They'd beat the hell out of you and then ask, 'Can I get a visa?' They jammed hostages into closets, into rooms the size of a single mattress. One hostage, Michael Matrinko, spent 6 months in solitary confinement on a concrete floor with no windows. He drew shapes on the wall to fall asleep. 40 years later, he still does it. Guards would come into cells in the middle of the night, press an unloaded gun to a hostage's head, and pull the trigger. A mock execution. For amusement, Bill Keogh, a school administrator who happened to be visiting the embassy the day it was seized, enter. Captivity as a 6'9" man of 240 pounds. He left as a skeleton. He lost 80 pounds in captivity. He died 5 years later. Barry Rosen's wife, and 2 small children, waited 444 days to find out if he was coming home. He suffered recurring PTSD for years after his release, describing it as an overwhelming sense of a loss of self. These were not soldiers. They were diplomats, clerks, military attachés, secretaries, ordinary people who went to work one morning and did not come home for a year and a half. Jimmy Carter watched all of it from the White House and tried everything he could think of to bring them back. He tried diplomacy, month after month of negotiations through Algeria, through Germany, through the United Nations. Nothing. He tried sanctions, freezing Iranian assets, cutting diplomatic relations. Nothing. He tried public appeals, private overtures, back-channel messages. Nothing. Khomeini held all the cards, and he knew it. Every day that passed was another day of humiliation for America. ABC News launched a nightly program called America Held Hostage, counting the days of captivity on national television. Carter's approval rating fell below Richard Nixon's at the height of Watergate. Ronald Reagan was running for president, and the hostage crisis was his single most powerful argument that Carter was too weak to lead. Carter needed the hostages home. He needed them home before November 1980. There was only one option left. He called in the military. The officer who walked into the White House in early 1980 to brief the president on the rescue mission was Colonel Charlie Beckwith. He was not a subtle man. He was built like a linebacker, talked like a drill sergeant, and had a reputation inside the Army as the most uncompromising officer alive. But he had something nobody else in the US military had. He had spent a year embedded with the British SAS. He had seen what a truly elite special forces unit looked like. And when he came back to America, he spent a decade trying to build the American equivalent against the active resistance of an Army establishment that did not want it. The Army did not understand why they needed a special unit that could do things regular soldiers couldn't. They gave Beckwith no funding, no facilities, no cooperation. He had to fight for every man, every weapon, every dollar. By 1977, after years of bureaucratic warfare, Delta Force was officially established. It had never conducted a real-world mission. The Iran hostage rescue would be its debut. Beckwith briefed Carter personally. He told the president the plan was workable. He believed that. Carter told Beckwith directly, "I do not want to undertake this operation, but we have no other recourse. We're going to do this." Carter was not a military man. He was a nuclear engineer and a politician. He was authorizing the most complex special operation in American history, based on a briefing and a gut feeling from a colonel he had just met. He had no intelligence network inside Iran because he had previously ordered the dismantling of the CIA's spy network there due to the agency's history of overthrowing governments. The planners were working partly from tourist maps. They were planning a raid into the heart of a hostile capital with no eyes on the ground and incomplete information about where the hostages were held. Beckwith needed to plan for up to 6 different buildings inside the embassy compound where the hostages might be. That required more men. More men required more helicopters. The complexity multiplied, and nobody stopped to ask what happened if the helicopters didn't arrive. The operation had a code name, Eagle Claw. It had a timeline of 2 nights, and it had more moving parts than almost any military operation ever attempted. Night 1, 6 C-13O transport aircraft would fly from Masira Island in Oman, carrying 132 soldiers and fuel bladders to a salt flat in the Iranian desert, codenamed Desert 1, 320 kilometers southeast of Tehran, empty, remote. A CIA officer named Major John Carney had secretly flown into Iran months earlier, landed on the salt flat alone at night, installed infrared landing lights, and tested the ground hardness, then flew home without being detected. 8 Navy RH-53D Sea Stallion helicopters would launch from the deck of the USS Nimitz in the Arabian Sea and fly 600 miles low level across Iranian territory in radio silence to reach Desert 1. The helicopters would refuel from the C-130Os. Delta Force would board. Then everyone would fly to a second location, a mountain hideout outside Tehran, and conceal themselves through the daylight hours under camouflage netting. Night 2. CIA operatives already inserted into Tehran had pre-staged vehicles. Trucks disguised as local commercial vehicles would drive Delta Force into the city under cover of darkness. The assault would split into teams. The main force would storm the embassy compound simultaneously from multiple entry points. A smaller team would raid the Iranian Foreign Ministry to to rescue 3 diplomats held separately there. A C-130 gunships would circle the city providing fire support. Army Rangers would simultaneously seize an airfield south of Tehran. The hostages, once freed, would be flown there. C-141 transport aircraft would land and take everyone out of Iran. Clean, precise, unstoppable on paper. The minimum requirement for the mission to proceed was 6 operational helicopters at Desert 1. They sent 8 to allow for 2 failures. What the planners did not account for was what the Iranian desert would do to 8 Navy helicopters on a 600-mile low-level flight in radio silence on a warm April night. They were about to find out. April 24th, the C-130s lift off from Masira Island at dusk. 6 aircraft carrying 132 men and thousands of gallons of jet fuel. They cross into Iranian airspace and descend to low level. Ahead of them on radar, a massive weather system is forming. Not rain, not cloud, a haboob, a wall of suspended fine sand stretching hundreds of meters into the sky, invisible on radar until you are inside it. The C-130 crews radio a warning back to the helicopter force following behind. Crucially, the message is not received. The helicopter crews are already underway in radio silence. They fly directly into the wall of sand with no warning. What happens next destroys the mission before it starts. The first helicopter develops a warning indicating a cracked rotor blade. The crew makes the decision to land in the desert and wait for rescue. 1 helicopter down. The crew sits in the darkness in the middle of Iran, waiting. The second helicopter loses all navigation and electrical instruments in the dust, flying through a brown cloud with no horizon and no reference points. The crew pushes on toward Desert 1. The third helicopter develops mechanical problems in the storm and turns back to the Nimitz. 2 helicopters down, 6 remaining, exactly the minimum. When the C-130s land at Desert 1, they find the salt flat is not as empty as planned. A bus of Iranian civilians rolls down the road and is immediately detained by Delta Force operators. 44 Iranians held at gunpoint in the desert while a classified American military operation unfolds around them. Then a fuel truck appears, moving fast, not slowing for the soldiers waving it down. A soldier fires a rocket at it. The truck explodes in a fireball visible for miles in every direction. Black smoke rising into the desert sky. The operation has been on Iranian soil for less than an hour. It has already been compromised twice, and the helicopters are still coming in one by one, late, damaged, limping out of the dust. The ground force commander, Colonel Beckwith, stands in the dark doing math. 1 helicopter has a hydraulic failure discovered on arrival at Desert 1. It cannot make the onward flight to Tehran. 5 operational helicopters remaining, 1 below the minimum of 6 required. He gets on the satellite radio to his commanders. His voice is flat. He recommends abort. Carter, woken in the White House, is told by his Secretary of Defense that Beckwith feels the mission must be aborted. Carter asks one question: is that Beckwith's recommendation? Yes, Carter says. Let's go with his recommendation. Eagle Claw is over. Not in Tehran, not at the embassy, not in a firefight. On a salt flat in the desert because of sand. 32 soldiers who flew into Iran ready to bring 53 people home, are now trying to get themselves out. And in the chaos of that withdrawal, the disaster becomes something worse. One of the C-130s is running low on fuel. It needs to leave immediately. To allow it to reposition, Marine Major James Schaefer is directed to move his helicopter. His nose wheel is flat. He cannot taxi. He tries to hover taxi, lifting just off the ground. To clear the C-130, he stirs a blinding dust cloud. In the brown, zero visibility, disoriented, he drifts. His helicopter slides sideways into the C-130 at full rotor speed. The rotors shred through the aircraft. Jet fuel ignites. The fireball goes up like a sun. Burning metal scatters across the desert. Ammunition inside both aircraft begins cooking off, rounds firing in every direction. Men tumble out of the side door of the C-130. 8 men are dead in seconds, 5 Air Force, 3 Marines. Their bodies will be left in the desert. The surviving helicopters are abandoned. Classified documents, maps. The remaining men pile onto the surviving C-130s. They fly out of Iran in complete silence. Behind them, the salt flat glows orange. In Tehran, 53 Americans sleep in their cells. They will learn what happened from their guards, who come in laughing. Carter goes on television the morning of April 25th. He looks like a man who aged 10 years overnight. He accepts full responsibility. His voice is controlled. His eyes are not. The press conference is brutal. Khomeini goes on television the same day and calls the disaster an act of God. He says angels intervened to protect Iran. Iranian state television broadcasts footage of the burning wreckage for days. American helicopters, American equipment, American classified documents scattered across the desert for a revolution that still needed to prove itself to its own people. The images are a propaganda gift beyond anything they could have staged. The Secretary of State, Cyrus Vance, who had opposed the mission and been overruled, resigns. He is the first Secretary of State to resign over a policy disagreement since 1915. Carter's last real chance of rescue was gone. The hostages would not be released for another 9 months. When they finally were, on January 20th, 1981, the timing was not accidental. That was the exact day Ronald Reagan was inaugurated as the 40th President of the United States. Iran held the hostages until the moment Carter left power. The man who had tried everything, who had authorized the mission, who had sat by the phone waiting for news that never came, was denied even the dignity of seeing his people come home on his watch. Carter lost the 1980 election to Reagan in one of the largest landslides in American history. He would later say that the hostage crisis and Eagle Claw were the primary reasons. He was probably right. One Air Force colonel who was on the ground at Desert One described it as the most colossal episode of hope, despair, and tragedy I had experienced in nearly 3 decades of military service. He was not wrong. But what happened next is the part of this story that nobody tells. Here is the uncomfortable truth about Operation Eagle Claw. It was the best thing that ever happened to the United States military. The Holloway Report, commissioned by the Joint Chiefs of Staff immediately after the disaster, was brutal. It found that Eagle Claw failed primarily because 4 separate military branches had planned and trained for the operation in complete isolation from each other. The Army Delta Force operators had never trained with the Navy helicopter pilots. The Air Force C-130 crews had never trained with the Marine helicopter crews. Every branch used its own equipment, its own procedures, its own communication protocols. Nobody had rehearsed the full operation end to end. Nobody had tested the helicopters in conditions even remotely similar to what they encountered. The planning used tourist maps for a country where America had no intelligence assets on the ground. It was not one branch's failure. It was the failure of a military that had never been forced to work as a single organism. Eagle Claw forced that. The investigation led directly to the creation of U.S. Special Operations Command, SOCOM, and the Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC. One unified command structure, one doctrine, one training pipeline that every branch feeds into. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps, all of them working under a single framework with shared standards, shared equipment, shared communication. The lack of capable Army helicopter pilots for low-level night operations led directly to the creation of the 161st Special Operations Aviation Regiment, the Night Stalkers. Their motto is, "Night Stalkers don't quit." They were built specifically because of what happened at Desert One. They trained for exactly the conditions that destroyed Eagle Claw. They became the best military helicopter pilots on Earth. The investigation also led to the Goldwater-Nichols Act of 1986, the most significant reorganization of the U.S. military since World War II, forcing joint operations doctrine across the entire Defense Department. Every successful American special operation since 1980 runs on the doctrine that was written in the ashes of Desert One. Every targeted raid, every hostage rescue, every night the Night Stalkers fly low and dark over hostile territory. It all traces back to a salt flat in Iran where everything went wrong. On May 2nd, 2011, SEAL Team 6 flew into Abbottabad, Pakistan, on modified stealth Black Hawk helicopters. They dropped into the compound of Osama Bin Laden. They found him on the 3rd floor. They killed him. The helicopters that flew that mission were built on the doctrine of the Night Stalkers. The SEAL team that conducted it was trained under JSOC, the command born from Eagle Claw's failure. The intelligence that found Bin Laden was gathered by a CIA infrastructure rebuilt after Eagle Claw exposed how badly Carter's earlier dismantling of the agency had damaged American intelligence capability. The most successful special operation in American history was made possible because of the worst. The 8 men of Desert One never got to know that. They flew into a sandstorm on the night of April 24th, 1980, and they did not come back. They are the reason every special operation that came after was possible. There is footage of the Desert One site taken by Iranian soldiers the morning after. Burned hulks of helicopters, scattered equipment, American gear abandoned in the sand, soldiers walking through it triumphantly, pointing at classified documents blowing in the desert wind. It is one of the most humiliating images in American military history. But the military that walks into every hostile compound today, on every continent, in total darkness, with perfect coordination and zero communication failures, that military was built from the wreckage of that night. Sometimes the most important victories in history come disguised as disasters. The 8 men of Desert One never saw what they built. They just flew into the dark and did not come back. That is enough.